So here we are in the last day of the conference of Science and Non-Duality in Holland 2012. There has been a lot of presentations that have been very interesting for me, because what is happening here is we're trying to find out how we can describe the subjective experience of the world at the same time as describing the objective reality out there. And this has always been a challenge to find a unified model that could include both the inner and outer, the subjective and the objective. And with me is Ulisse di Corpo from Italy, that has presented even mathematical equations of how emotions that I claim are the motivators for doing something can be expressed mathematically.
Yes.
Please, Ulisse.
Okay. Well,
what's your background?
I'm a psychologist, experimental psychologist, and a PhD in statistics. Well, for various different reasons, I got interested in a mathematical model which was developed by Luigi Fantapia in 1941. And the point of this model is that physicists have rejected in the 1930s half of the solutions of the fundamental equations of physics. The reason is that in these solutions we have two different trends in energy. The positive solution describes energy which diverges from the past to the future and is governed by the law of entropy. And we have a causality that precedes effects. The second solution instead describes energy which diverges backwards in time from the future to the past. And it describes for us that we're moving forward in time energy that concentrates, the increase in complexity, differentiation, structures and order. And the mathematical properties of this negative solution are exactly the properties of living beings. So what Fantapie said in 1941 is that these mathematical equations allow to arrive to a unitary theory of the physical and biological world. The physical world would be a consequence of causes placed in the past, whereas the biological world would be the consequence of causes which retroact from the future. Well, his theory, even if he was one of the biggest, greatest mathematical geniuses of last century, he was working with Einstein. Enrico Fermi became a member of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, so he really was in the elite. Well, the fact that he suggested that causality could work in a different way from the classical cause and effect model was not accepted. And his theory of syntropy, this unitary theory, in a way just got in oblivion. It was forgotten. And the other problem was that he was not able to devise experiments that could prove that causality was moving backwards in time with living systems. Now, in recent years, it has become possible to do this kind of experiments thanks to random event generators. It is possible to manipulate future causes in a totally unpredictable way in the past and see if there is a correlation between what is going to happen in the past and what we have measured. What is going to happen in the future and what we have measured in the past. And this correlation is extremely strong when we get in account the autonomic nervous system. For example, measures like heart rate and skin conductance. And that would mean that this backward in time energy, we would acquire it through the autonomic nervous system and experience it in the form of feelings. Consequently, we would be in between say, information that comes from the past, like quantitative and objective information that we can process with our brain, and information coming from the future that we experience in the form of feeling that direct our behavior towards a aim in a that orient our behavior.
So from the past, we have memories and thoughts.
And we have quantitative and objective information. From the future, we have subjective and qualitative information.
Emotions from the future, thoughts from memories.
And
from
we are
the
constantly, in a way, in a state of choice, because we have to choose between what the head tells us and what the autonomic nervous system, the heart, is pointing towards. Now, because our culture has focused on the brain, we usually follow, say, our thoughts. We follow computation, we follow rationality, and we don't give the appropriate attention to these feelings that would direct our choices and behavior. And this means that the negative solution is governed by entropy.
And negative is just because there is a minus. There is no sort of negative value.
No, it's not a negative
emotional value.
No,
okay.
it's
mathematically.
From a mathematical point of view, the equations are solved using a square root, and square roots always have a positive solution and a negative solution. And the negative solution has negative time, so time flows backwards in time.
Crazy.
Yes. That would mean that the time we experience, this sequential time, is just one type of time, because in reality, past, present, and future would, at least at the quantum level, coexist, be a unitary time. Now, what I was saying before is that if we follow only the thoughts which are governed by the cause and effect logic, by the forward in time solution which diverges, what we get to are, we develop solutions that are governed by the law of entropy. So if we produce policies which are just based on the rational approach, then we'll get as a consequence an increase in entropy. And this is what is happening a bit everywhere in industries, in economics, but also in politics. We see a constant increase of entropy, disorder, and crisis.
In one way, we seem to get more organized on the surface.
Yes,
but there is something maybe behind.
Something missing.
Yeah.
Now, so according to this model, feelings and emotions can be very important in order to direct our behavior, and often when we find the right direction, we experience what is named intuition. It's a kind of knowledge which it doesn't stem from rationality. It's totally different, and nuance is strongly correlated to emotions. Now, according to this entropy, syntropy model, life would be only partially material, and because of our material body, we have material needs. We have to contrast the law of entropy, and so we have to acquire energy, we have to acquire matter to because our structure needs to be regenerated. But if we just acquire matter, we don't understand how the regenerative processes take place. And so we, beside matter, we need, according to this model, to acquire also syntropy, which is, say, a kind of immaterial level of reality, but which would be the fundamental level of life. And as a consequence of this model, we have other two vital needs next to the material needs. We have a need of cohesion and unity, because syntropy has a unitary property, and when we acquire it, we converge. And how we experience this acquisition of syntropy, because it converges energy and is linked to the autonomic nervous system, we experience feelings of warmth in this area of the body associated to well-being, and usually these feelings are named love, feelings of love. Instead, when we are not acquiring syntropy, entropy prevails, and we feel emptiness, chill, cold, and feelings of, say, suffering.
Depression.
Usually this is called anxiety, angst.
Oh, okay. And when you stay in that, you can get depressed.
Yes, but it's strictly correlated to depression. Depression, according to this model, is something different.
Okay.
Because syntropy is converging, our consciousness would be very, say, localized. We feel to be very small, localized, but entropy has inflated the universe towards infinite. And when we compare ourselves to the universe, which is infinite, we realize that we are equal to zero. So there is a conflict that originates between our feeling of existence, the fact that syntropy provides us with this kind of feeling of existence, and the fact that comparing ourselves to this immense universe, we realize, we become aware that we're equal to nothing. And that is what, Shakespeare described as to be or not to be. That is the problem. And that is one of the key problems of every person, that if we don't solve this identity conflict, we have the consumption of energy. We feel it in the as depression, as being meaningless, and we go towards, say, destruction, suicide, or
And we will try to fill the emptiness with material stuff.
Yes,
that consume even more of resources.
What happens is, if you see it as an equation, it is a very simple equation, because you have myself, I, compared to the universe, I'm equal to zero. And what people try to do is to increase the numerator of this equation. For example, expanding their ego. And that means buying material objects, or increasing their wealth, their power,
control,
and all this goes through the consumption of material objects, a material consumption which is not necessary for survival and for life and for a good quality life.
The best things in life are free, they sing.
Yes. So what we get to is that often the kind of difficulties we have in economics are not really a consequence of, say, economical difficulties, but it's a consequence of the fact that because people want to provide a meaning, they have this vital meaning of a vital need of providing a meaning to their existence. They become selfish. They want to accumulate, and how the wealth should propagate, circulate in the economical system is ruined by this need of providing a meaning to our life.
So we can never really find meaning on that way. We try to fill the emptiness, but we'll never find reach the goal.
You can increase the numerator as much as you want, but when you compare it to the infinite of the universe, you're always equal to zero. So that is not the road. The only road to solve this identity conflict is when we unite ourselves with the universe. Because when I unite myself with the universe, you take universe, and you're equal to I. So the identity, we find it only through union, which is
on a subjective plane,
which is the property of cohesion, of love, of syntropy. And that tells you another thing, is that the aim is this aim of union, of love, according to this model. And we can reach this aim only uniting syntropy and entropy, because the universe is entropy, it's inflation. Ourself is syntropy. Only when we unite these two polarities, we get to our meaning. So both syntropy and entropy are necessary in this model. It's not that syntropy is good and entropy is bad.
You know about Ken Wilber?
No.
Well, but he's saying the same thing.
Yes, but at the same time, it's important to say that the evolutionary trend of life is that of maximizing syntropy, and we can see that in the energy resources that we are using now. They are mainly coming from biological masses, for example, petroleum, gas, coal, and that shows that what life does, it concentrates energy, and energy concentration is syntropy. Syntropy is energy concentration. So what naturally life does is that we tend to maximize syntropy. So if we want to go towards economical well-being and personal well-being, one of the laws would be that of maximizing these the properties that govern this law of syntropy, but this is done through this continuous process of entropy and syntropy. So in a way, we evolve, entropy destroys what we've done, and we have to go further on. And according to this model, any crisis is an opportunity because it forces us to revisit all our certainties. And
the comforting thing is also to me that this connects to every teaching of wisdom from ancient times. And the Veda tradition maybe is one of the most fully comprehensive
this was
theory.
You know, Fantapier was a mathematician, a science man, but he really was in a way amazed on how he could find his message that he found through mathematics, which was fundamentally a message of love, I would say, because syntropy in a way would be the energy of life, but would be also the energy of love that it's guiding us, and he could find the same message in Christianity, but also in the Quran and in all the major religious and spiritual traditions. So in a way, something that everyone has ever, we know it from millenniums, but science has forgot it, because the experimental method on which science is based requires quantitative and objective data. And when you can only use quantitative and objective data, you're forced to be only on the positive solution, which propagates from the past to the future. And that means that even if the technology is extremely useful, when it is developed in this way, it will inevitably end increasing entropy.
Yes.
So
the new reality we want to create needs to be in accordance with our emotions.
Yes, with our
emotions.
with subjective and qualitative data. Now, economist and philosopher of the 18th century.
And we have to revise what we're doing, really, because I don't think we can really have any chance of reaching what we're aiming for if we don't revise first what has been happening in me, because what's out there is a reflection of.
Yes, that is certainly true, but we need a new scientific methodology paradigm. And that is already there. We don't have to invent anything new, because what we're using in our studies, instead of the method of differences on which it's based, the experiment the methodology, we're using what is named the method of concomitances, which was devised by Stuart Mill in 1863. And this other method is a scientific method that allows you to study causality but also retrocausality. And it allows to put together quantitative and qualitative information, subjective and objective. Because the problem is that usually science disregards your inner feelings and experiences.
It should be kept away.
Because it says I'm not able to measure it. Because when I ask you, do you feel happy, depressed, or what, you'll provide me a subjective answer and not an objective one. But it's extremely interesting that with this methodology which was devised by Stuart Mill, it is possible to handle in an incredibly interesting way all what is qualitative and subjective.
And you can also with inquiry, you can ask people that are independent, what is your experience, and there is actually a way also in that realm to make some scientific evaluation.
Well, now until now, psychologists were trying to translate what it is qualitative in quantitative data. Psychological tests are devised in order to translate qualitative in quantitative. But what I'm saying is that we can use qualitative as it is without having to translate it in quantitative. And this is what the methodology that Stuart Mill devised allows us to do. And what I think is extremely important that this methodology gets into science, because when you use only the classical experimental methodology, which is based on the study of differences, you get very unstable results. For example, in the pharmaceutical field, only 18% of the experiments, they find that you're able to replicate the results as an average only in 18% of the cases. So 82% of the results that you get using the experimental method in medicine are not confirmed, they're not true, and we're based therefore on a knowledge which is not a real, true knowledge.
So medicine is just slightly better than placebo?
Yes.
It's often claimed.
And it might be even worse than placebo because it often have toxic effects that can...
Another realm that I think is interesting, environmental economy is like a dichotomy in itself.
Yes.
When you put value on resources that are necessary for our survival.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of confusion about how we use environmental economy.
Yes.
It's a slightly different area, but in some places it's used in a bad way, I think, because we're quantifying stuff that should not be quantified.
Yes. Now the point is that because of this, say, classical approach where we only see the cause and effect logic, in economics usually we use a cost and benefit approach, and that means that any information, in order to evaluate it, in order to assess policy, you have to translate it in a quantitative way and therefore give a value, a quantitative value. But this is not always possible because, as I was saying before, all what is the inner experience of the person is not there is no way to translate it from the qualitative to the quantitative side. And there are many other, for example, with nuclear power, if you see the cost and benefits calculations, what it happens is that you put in the assessment process only what can be translated in the quantitative manner, and whatever is not possible to translate it, it's out of the equation, and that means you put the cost of the fuel, which is much more convenient than the other fuels. Not always you put the cost of construction of the the power plant, because sometimes it's paid by the government and not by the private industries.
And then the waste is that we need to be taken care of for a long time.
That is not included.
That is included sometimes by a depreciation factor.
Yes.
That reduces the cost to present net value, which is very, very low.
Well, if you think that now in the United States alone, the costs associated to nuclear waste, the handling of nuclear waste, is higher than the cost of education in the United States is higher now. The handling of nuclear waste has reached higher cost than the education, and that tells you how much entropy is associated to and how many costs are associated with that type of choice, and which is not included usually in the cost and benefit assessments, because nuclear waste will be handled by the government and not by the private companies.
Yeah.
So what happens is that costs which don't get into the equation, they are often then given to the collectivity.
Yeah.
People have to pay for the cost that economists didn't put in the equations.
And that tends to happen in different areas, like with the money that is produced by private banks.
Well,
When you and I don't take another loan,
yes.
it will be the governments, the people that will take the loan in
Yes,
in
well,
the end.
Well, that
Anyway,
that
to
is,
save
yes. That was not so until 1998, because there was the Stanley Act from 1932 that it was generally accepted worldwide, that said that banks had to be divided in commercial banks and investment banks. And the government was guaranteeing deposits of commercial banks. In 1998 in the USA, but in each country in a different year, this law was removed, and this allowed to use deposits of citizens for investments. And this took a huge amount of money in the stock exchange everywhere in the world, with high rises of quotations and everyone putting the money.
That was a way to keep the growth growing every year.
Yes, but
so it was the same system, but that sort of was outgrowing itself,
yes,
starting to collapse.
Yes,
so
but
in order to
you know, at a certain point, stock exchanges started to fall, and people then said, well, if stock exchanges do not guarantee my money, I'll put it in the house and
the derivatives and whatnot, in order to make the loans increase.
Now,
because that's the way we produce the growing money.
What we have now, and what became clear in 2008, is that this system has created a debt of the banks, which is of $800 trillion, which is that means 10 times higher of the world GNP of the world, because the GNP of the world is 60 trillions. Now we have a debt of the banks which is 800 trillions. That is 10 times, more than 10 times higher than the GDP of the world. And there is no way to repay that debt. And because of that debt that has been, in a way, given to the governments, countries like Greece, Iceland collapsed first. And what the people said is, we don't understand why we have to pay for a debt that was caused by the bankers. Now Greece is falling apart. Probably Italy will fall apart because of this debt, and there is no way technically to repay such a huge debt caused by bad investment and use of the money.
Yeah, and with a system that mathematically has to grow every year, right?
Well,
because if it doesn't, it can never pay for the increasing interests.
Yes, I think that we are on the verge of a big change.
Yeah.
Now, there are some countries like Russia, China, South American countries, and also Arabic countries, which are suggesting to replace to have a new Bretton Woods. The Bretton Woods was the place where in 1944 the countries that the winner countries of the Second World War met and decided the rules of the monetary system. And the rules were that the international currency was the dollar, and it was guaranteed by gold, and all the other currencies were linked to the dollar. And this system broke up during the Vietnam War, and it was replaced with the petrodollar system. So the petrol was guaranteing the dollar, and all the other currencies were linked to the dollar. Now we had
Eliseo.
What?
Eliseo. Ulisse. I think we could be talking for another 50 batteries.
Yes, okay.
I will have another interview very soon. And more than the meaning of life, we've also covered a lot of the economics.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.